Hi, friends. This week's episode features Francis interviewing Anthony Clark, an Air Force veteran and public school teacher who's running for Congress as a Democratic Socialist in Illinois' 7th District's Democratic Party primary. He's got a fascinating story, and I really hope you enjoy this interview.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
All right, Anthony. So, I'm already recording, so we can kind of just jump right on into it. So, you guys reached out. As you said, you are an Air Force veteran. How long were you in the Air Force for?
So I served a little bit over 6 years active duty. My contract was for 6, but it took a few extra months to process. I was honorably discharged due to a disability, so it took a few months to process my disability claim. So I ended up serving about 6 years and 4 months.
And what did you do in the Air Force?
I was a C-17 crew chief, so I served on the Globemaster, the cargo aircraft.
Oh, yeah.
Those were my babies. Did whatever I had to do to make sure they got in the air and landed safely.
I've been stuffed in the back of a couple of those before.
Oh yeah. There are some beasts, but with the technology, it was really interesting to see how a lot of the work that we were doing was computer based and not necessarily, old school.
Yeah. So you spent some time in the Air Force. Kind of give us a timeline to you run. So I guess we should introduce you before we really jump in. So Anthony Clark, running for Congress in Illinois 7. So where is that?
So the Illinois 7th Congressional District is a huge district. You have over about 740,000 community members. You have a little bit over 400,000 registered voters. It spans from, you got a little bit of LaGrange, Westchester, Illinois. You have Maywood, Berwyn, a little bit of Bellwood, Hillside, goes into River Forest, Forest Park, Oak Park, Austin Community, East West Garfield Park, little sliver of Humboldt Park. You have, West Loop, South Loop, you go into back of the yards, Inglewood. So it's a huge district, and with gerrymandering, it's an interesting setup. But we've been here all my life.
I'm looking at it now. It's kind of a backward C. Looks like a dragon head.
Right. There you go.
And how long have you been living in Chicago, or in at least the Chicago area?
Definitely all my life, born and raised. My parents, Ron and Blanche, shout out to them. My father is also a military veteran. He served in Vietnam. But I was born on the south side of Chicago, Morgan Park area. They scraped together their money, saved up. He eventually used his GI Bill, but initially they started renting. They wanted to find, a safer area in their perspective, with greater opportunity. So we moved from the south side to the west side of Chicago, ended up in Oak Park, which is the Chicagoland suburb, right outside of the Austin community, Oak Park, Illinois. And, been here pretty much ever since, outside of moving to Atlanta for a little bit over a year and then entering into the military.
So after the Air Force, you came back, and that's when you started pursuing teaching in Chicago?
Definitely. For me, when I signed up for the military, I didn't sign up thinking I was going to do 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. For me, I was just looking to escape negativity in my life. And I think that's a narrative oftentimes for a lot of individuals that I met and served with. They're experiencing, various disparities in regard to education, in regards to healthcare, in regards to housing, and just in regards to overall opportunity. And the military offers that. They offer to pay for your education. They offer housing. They offer a paycheck. So I got into some trouble when I was 20 years old, going on 21. And the military was the option, the best option for me in that moment, I felt. So that's why I entered in. Wasn't interested in school at first, but started pursuing my education while serving active duty. So I was going to school part-time while serving, ended up getting my first 2 degrees actually while I was serving active duty, bachelor's in communications and a master's in criminal justice, because I always felt I was going to get out and do something else. But when I was shot in 2007, which led to my PTSD diagnoses. And, I was diagnosed with Behçet's disease from working with chemicals within a wheel and tire shop, most likely. That precluded me from, pursuing many of the careers that I was possibly interested in. So I kind of reevaluated. The military offered the Troops to Teachers program. I felt that would be a great opportunity to give back to the community, I jumped on it, came back and started teaching in the city while I was pursuing my next degree.
So you were shot while you were in the Air Force.
It's one of the, I think it's a story that's, I don't want to say, I don't like using ableist language, but it's a ridiculous story. So when I was shot, I wasn't actually deployed. I was supposed to deploy the next day to Turkey. And I'm sure, other service members could possibly attest to this. Oftentimes, military bases drive certain economies in certain towns and certain areas. And that often comes with, some locals not being, completely happy that you got a lot of young servicemen with money, roaming around their town and, spending dollars and so on and so forth. So we went out the night before I was supposed to deploy to Turkey to celebrate. And a local gang, honestly, didn't like us being at that club at that night in that city. We were downtown Seattle. They tried to fight us. We tried to disengage, let them know, hey, we're active duty military. We don't want any issues. We tried to leave the establishment because security had broken up the scrum. Got into the vehicle. I was in the passenger seat, and that same gang located the car and just unloaded on the vehicle. So they found our vehicle, started shooting at the car. They hit the ECU, the electronic control unit of the vehicle. So we were just basically dead in the water. So I didn't have my service weapon on me, so I could not return fire to protect myself further. So the only thing I could think to do was hit the lever of the vehicle to kind of place my head between the front door and the back door hinge, where the metal was, and try to get as low as possible. I ended up being struck across the chest. Thankfully it didn't penetrate through my chest. It was like a deep graze. A friend of mine, he was shot twice. He actually entered his chest and entered his arm. And he actually had to return fire with his service weapon to defend us. And, they ended up leaving the scene. We dumped out of the vehicle, assessed our wounds. Police came. It was a hectic scene. Initially, they didn't even care about our injuries, of course. They put us in handcuffs. And, but once they assessed the situation, determined that we were active duty service members, witnesses on scene, let them know that we were defending ourselves. We were given over, to military police. And, that was the story.
That's wild. You didn't even get overseas to get shot, and PTSD. No. They gave it to you right here in America.
Exactly. And what's so interesting about it now that I'm a teacher, I think it attests to, I have so many students. I teach high school. They haven't served in the military. They've never been deployed. They've never been to a war zone. But many of the manifestations and symptoms that I experience as a disabled veteran having PTSD, I see a lot of those same symptoms in my students, just from everyday life of, gun violence within their communities. Many of my students, I've lost 12 students to gun violence in my 11 years of teaching. Most notably Elijah Sims in 2016, who was shot in the head a day before his 17th birthday. So they experience a lot of these symptoms, and it's interesting. So it gives me perspective to be able to connect with them and talk to them about mental health and the importance of eliminating stigmas and trying to seek help.
Looking, kind of reading over your website, you talk about how, post-military, you're, anti-imperialism, anti-war, which is, the very basis of this podcast, of the show that we do.
No question.
What do you tell your students, when they say, hey, Mr. Clark, I want to join the military, maybe, I want to get out of here. Like, how do I do, I want to, because I'm very anti, when I get out of the military, I eventually want to do anti-recruitment pushes. But
right,
we also,
no question.
Nate and I also understand that, as you said, sometimes you just get into a situation where you don't have very many options. Maybe you get into a bit of trouble and you need to get out of that immediate area and go somewhere where you're going to get a steady paycheck, you're going to get benefits, you're going to get health, you're going to get education. But at the same time, it's I guess it's how do you assess that?
That's a great question. And, when I, as a democratic socialist, of course, that question comes up often because people are like, wait, you're a socialist, but you're a veteran as well. And it's not like I hide my truth. I share my story because I feel so many people could learn from it in regard to the nuance. So I am, as you stated, I'm 100% against war. I'm 100% against our military industrial complex. I'm always for diplomacy first. I believe that we destabilize and destroy democracies and other nations for nothing more than profit. We enter into wars for nothing more than profit. and people are losing their lives for nothing more than profit. So we have to change systemically how we view patriotism and how we view our foreign policies. So, I'm open about that, but I also understand the nuance that goes into the military being one of the largest welfare states. The military preys on the poor. They're counting on individuals being desperate and looking for escapes. And they're right there. Uncle Sam's right there with a helping hand to reach out. So when I talk to my students, there's not a lot of them, honestly, that want to enter. But yes, there's always one, two, or three, a few that, learn about my military experience. They're interested. So they want to sit down with me and talk. One, I don't judge them because I understand I've been there. I've been desperate.
Sure.
I've been in search of escapes. Similar to, parents that send their students to charter schools. I'm 100% against charter schools, but I'm against the institution. I'm not against the parents because I understand parents looking for escapes,
right.
For public schools that are underfunded. So for me, I just share with them my truth. Looking back at my situation, I did end up getting into some trouble. And of course, you can't change the past that made me who I am now, but I would not have entered into the military. I would have, fought through it, possibly just worked and, tried to build up. I don't know what I would have done, but if I, of course, could have gone back in time, I would not have entered in. But because I have, it's granted me these perspectives. So I just share with them my truths. I don't try to guide them. I don't try to tell them they can't join because I understand, they're staring down. If you're staring down, the possibility of not waking up tomorrow, you're looking at your mother or your father or your grandmother. They don't know if they could pay rent, put food on the table. You're rationing your insulin. I mean, there's multiple levels out there of struggle that exist. I get it. So for me, I don't try to guide, their decision. I just share with them my truth, my experiences of imperialism, of the military industrial complex, of seeing how one person's patriot could be another person's terrorist, and just seeing how, we essentially go into other nations and destroy democracies. Look what's happening in Bolivia right now. Of course, it's not always direct military action, but just overall with our government, the role that we play, across this continent. And I hope that by telling my truth, my experiences, of dealing with individuals that were racist, sexist, homophobic, bigoted, who viewed patriotism as, how many individuals could they kill, who always othered individuals, that they would then internalize that and hopefully make a better decision.
Now, what got you from Air Force to teacher to now running for Congress?
Yes, definitely. So when I became a teacher, I always wanted to give back. I'm a huge Muhammad Ali fan. Speaking of the military, of course, he refused to enter into the military service. I think he's one of the most courageous individuals of all time. And one of his quotes that I was raised upon, through my father, Ronald Clark, and my mother, Blanche Clark, is service to others is the rent you pay for room here on this earth. So I was always interested in giving back, because I struggled myself. I experienced it. Then I entered into the military and learned that struggle was a universal language, like there's struggle all over the country. There's struggle all over, the globe, so it just expanded. And I'm just thinking to myself, OK, now I'm a teacher. I experienced the military industrial complex. I saw struggle globally. What can I do coming back home with my expanded experiences to give back? So I started teaching, but yet and still, as a teacher, I felt like I was just treating symptoms, like I wasn't really changing anything at a systemic level. The same individuals I was helping on Monday, I would have to help the next Monday because we weren't changing or addressing the root cause. So then I started my own nonprofit, which is called Suburban Unity Alliance in 2016. We do a lot of equity work, from helping immigrant community members to helping small businesses to pushing, progressive policies. Like we collaborated with PASO to, help push the Welcoming Village ordinance in our community. We've helped, survivors of sex trafficking. So across the board, we fight. We help a lot of homeless individuals, a lot of homeless veterans. But it got to the point where I asked myself, I could either spend the rest of my life feeding the homeless, or I could give all my energy and efforts to ending homelessness. The difference between treating symptoms and addressing the root cause. So I was actually nominated to run for office in 2018 because I received a Villager of the Year award based upon the work that I was doing as a teacher and a nonprofit director, along with the community. It was a group effort. And from that, individuals nominated me through Brand New Congress and Justice Democrats to run for office. And I accepted that nomination because, again, going back to, I felt the only way to change things on a systemic level and address root cause issues is to get into office and to directly attack and change policy.
So I've talked to a few other people who have run for Congress, and you're still doing a full-time job as well as running.
Oh, yes.
And also, you've got your nonprofit. So how are you? I guess how do you manage? When do you sleep?
That's a great question, and I get it asked. I get asked that a lot because people are like you're everywhere. When do you get to rest? And I feel like it sounds cheesy as hell to say, but like I honestly, in my mind, like I always tell myself, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Like there's just too much to do. So I get 3 hours a night, 3 maybe 4 hours a night. But there's always something to do. There's always someone in need. There's always an issue to attack and address. So while I have my youth, we're all young, young at heart at least. But while I have my youth, I don't have any children. I'm not married. This is my focus, and I'm going to give everything I have to the fight for justice.
So you're a Democratic Socialist, and looking over all of the different issues that you have on your website, a lot of them, align very much with Democratic Socialism. What do you think is the one that is the most important to you, like of your own, of the issues that you follow?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for asking it. But it's also an extremely difficult question to answer, because what I tell people, similar to what Bernie Sanders shares and why I'm a supporter of Bernie, the issues that we face are interconnected. They really are. They're interconnected root issues that we face. So in order to solve them, you need interconnected solutions. So it's hard for me to be a one issue individual. And I know you didn't ask that, and I'm not saying that, but it's hard to pick one issue because, perfect example of that is if we look at gun violence. I'm a survivor of gun violence. I've lost 12 students to gun violence. We have so many representatives out there currently. They just push out rhetoric. We have to close the loopholes to get stricter gun laws, right? But if you want to truly address gun violence, we have to look at mental health. We have to look at healthcare overall. We have to look at job opportunities or lack thereof. We have to look at schools and school closures. We have to look at food deserts. We have to look at overall divestment in communities and infrastructure. It's all interconnected, because what happens often is you get so many individuals desperate for opportunity, desperate for resources, bottled up in particular segregated communities, fighting and scratching and clawing for those same resources. So every issue is important. But for the top three, that I would say, are the umbrella issues that every other issue is interconnected to, of course, Medicare for all, as a human right. When I say that, I'm telling people we're not talking about access. We're not talking about for those who want it. We're talking about for all as a human right. We're talking about the Green New Deal. That's extremely important, because without our health or our environment, what other fight matters? We have to be healthy and on this earth to actually fight for other issues as well. And the other issue that ties directly in for me is the federal jobs guarantee, because that ties directly in with the Green New Deal, of course, and also with healthcare, because healthcare and the Green New Deal also creates job opportunities. And then, of course, under that, we have the end of war on drugs, legalization of cannabis, gun reform, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think personally, because I'm a socialist and I'm military and I'm a gun owner, and I like shooting, and I know I go hunting with people, and I always think that one of the, personally, one of the things that I always judge somebody when they're running for Congress is when they say gun control, what do they mean? And that's exactly, you hit the nail on the head, because it's not about, sure, we can ban things and we can make things, you mentioned if you're a stalker, if you're got domestic abuse on your record, no guns, you get them taken out, which 100%. Those are all, absolutely indicators for future gun violence, but also it is that, like, we have to assess the reason of why people are shooting other people.
Correct.
Like it's not the gun, that's doing this, it's the person. So what do we need to do for the person? And
exactly. I 100% agree.
Yeah, somebody like you who's being affected by it, but can see that there is something that is more. It's more of a. I don't want to say a societal issue, because that kind of falls into, maybe the way that Republicans talk about it, but it is kind of a look. There's a reason why people are shooting each other, and we need to discuss that. And
no, definitely.
Poverty. It's access to resources is what it always is. And you think about people shooting each other in the Old West because there was no resources, food, water, basic things like that. But now we have things like, you said, jobs, housing, healthcare, being able to survive day to day is where a lot of these problems kind of come from.
No, no question at all. No question. I agree. Of course, we could get stricter. We could close loopholes. We have to do that. We have to have common sense, gun laws. But as we stated, as we just discussed, we have to also identify the interconnected issues that exist. I believe that, gun violence should be treated as a public health epidemic. And we need to research it. We need to invest with the CDC to come up with better strategies. And, we also have to mention, the impact of capitalism and white supremacy that also plays a role within gun violence, because oftentimes we're getting a lot of these domestic terrorist attacks may not be necessarily identified as domestic terrorism, but that also plays a huge role as well. So we have to definitely address the interconnected root cause issues.
Now, another interesting thing that I found is you have a big piece on reparations. And not a lot of, I know Bernie has kind of talked about reparations, but reparations really isn't talked about, at least I've not noticed on a federal level too much. So I kind of, it's a very well thought out, but I kind of wanted to let you talk about reparations in your own words.
Yeah, of course, anyone can visit our website at voteanthonyclark.com. We have the most spelled out and prolific, I think, platform, definitely within our race and possibly throughout the nation, one of the top. But for me, it's simple, and I'm again making an I statement. I'm not speaking for anyone else, but capitalism is oppression and oppression is capitalism. And by design, throughout the history of the United States of America, we've maintained, and when I say we, the United States of America has maintained a top and a bottom. So, if you want to look at the genocide of natives and the theft of their land, into, 1619, the enslavement of Africans and chattel slavery, African descendants. From there, you have the end of slavery in 1865, but then you go to, Jim Crow, you go to segregation, you go to redlining and so on and so forth. So by design, local and federal governments throughout history have played direct roles in preventing certain demographics of society from building social and economic generational wealth. And I think that's a huge issue that exists. And when I say social and economic generational wealth, an example of economic would be, of course, because as socialists, we fight for everyone. I literally love everyone. I hope everyone loves me. This is a class war, so it's intersectional. We all have to join and fight together. But as an individual growing up, I could see where I had like white friends, for example, not all of them, of course, but white friends that literally, when we moved to Oak Park, we were the first family out of my family, overall family, to live like in a suburban community. So we didn't come with wealth. We didn't have a home being passed down. We didn't have life insurance policies being passed down. We were renters. My parents were struggling on a daily basis, but I had friends who had sprawling homes that were literally in their family for generations. And they just got passed down. You continue to live in the home, your grandfather, your grandmother, so on and so forth. Their life insurance policy goes to you, their property goes to you, and that enables certain families to continue to build economic wealth, because you build upon that. Many families don't have that, and it's by design. If you look at Tulsa, Oklahoma and Black Wall Street, when Black communities were thriving and they were literally burned to the ground and individuals were murdered. Socially, you could look at it to where myself, I was the first individual within my immediate family to attend college. When it was time for me to finally go to college within the military, I couldn't rely on my family to help me because though they were happy, though they didn't have that experience. So that made it more difficult. That provided more obstacles for me to attend. But then you also have individuals who grandparents, their parents, their guardians, so on and so forth, they've been to college. Look at the college scam, across this nation that happened. And, when individuals got charged, these actors and actresses and so on and so forth, they have so much access and capability to, gain entry into these doors that are often closed to so many. So when I talk reparations, it's from that understanding that it's bigger than just money. We could cut a check to anyone. But if you're cutting a check to people, and now, of course, it's not a monolith, not everyone, but if you're cutting checks to people who lack social and economic generational capital, that lack financial literacy, what good is that check? It's just going to dissipate. It's going to go away. It's not going to have the ability to build generational wealth. So similar to the Green New Deal, because the Green New Deal is basically infused into every policy. You have Green New Deal housing. You're going to have Green New Deal, federal jobs, so on and so forth. We need to attach reparations to every policy as well. So when we're talking about the legalization of cannabis at a federal level, similar to what's going on in Illinois, January 1st, we're going to be legalized at the state level. much of that money, a large portion of that money has to go back to the communities that prohibition devastated, that the war on drugs devastated, the disproportionate number of Black and brown and poor individuals from Black and brown communities that have been caught up within our criminal justice system because of a plant being illegal. So take money, allocate that money to improving our public educational systems, improving our social services, investing in our infrastructure. And across the board, when we talk about jobs, we have to make sure that a certain percentage of jobs goes to and is afforded to members of communities that have been hardest hit. So that's how I view reparations, like just in general. I know we can't get deep into the weeds, but just every policy, everything that we do has to be looked through a reparations lens. And we have to ask ourselves, how can we allocate funding into the communities most hit by the by design efforts of our government to keep certain demographics from building wealth? And shout out to Evanston, Illinois, by the way. Danny Glover is actually coming into town this week because they just legalized. Of course, we're legalized as a state, but they're going to allocate funds from legalization to invest directly into Black communities within the Evanston, Illinois community.
That's great. Yeah, I don't know if you know, I'm down in St. Louis, so it's just a whole nother reason to go over to the east side now.
Definitely. I'm in St. Louis quite often. Shout out to Cori Bush. She's running for Congress out of St. Louis. That's a homegirl of mine. So I've been on the front lines with her marching against police violence in St. Louis and Chicago. So definitely shout out to the Lou.
Now, I really like how you kind of framed that reparations, because it's when I see, when a state legalizes, you end up seeing, people who have money and have access to loans, generally, well-to-do white people, are the ones who end up opening the cannabis stores and
exactly.
opening like the yoga and weed store or whatever it is that insane, Californians do. And the idea of saying, no, we should be like, and I don't know how Illinois is going to do it. I hope they don't do it. From what I understand, Canada really dropped the ball with their legalization, but hopefully it is kind of a, if we have so much, we should be handing some of these licenses to build these businesses out to people who are in marginalized communities.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. There's definitely an effort. There's been a certain percentage of licenses that have been allocated for, individuals of color, individuals from the hardest hit communities. But again, we have to pay attention. We just can't pass a policy, sit back and expect accountability, because what can also happen is you have these rich white individuals that come in, they find a face, they front the money, they just find a face, but yet and still they still control the stakes. They're still profiting, while individuals within the hardest hit communities are not. So there's work to be done. Shout out to the 6 Democratic Socialist City Council members that are definitely boots to the ground and continue to do awesome work. So we're going to continue to fight.
Anthony, I can't believe that you would suggest that Illinois politicians might be corrupt in some way. Are like 4 of your last governors in prison at the moment or something?
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I think we take the cake. I'm pretty sure everyone in every community says, our local government, they take the cake on being crooked. But Illinois, I haven't seen too many animals like this one. Just the amount of corruption that exists, the efforts that are taken and undertaken to ensure that power remains centralized. It's utterly ridiculous.
Now, I hear a lot about the federal jobs guarantee. What exactly is that?
Yeah, definitely. For me, how I view the federal jobs guarantee is similar to the New Deal. Bernie Sanders mentions as well, FDR with the New Deal. I think our government has to play an active role in society. And right now we have an inordinate amount of individuals that are unemployed, underemployed, not making a livable wage. Right now, of course, the fight for 15, let's be honest, while that's great, $15 minimum wage is not enough. Minimum wage is not tied to inflation. It should be somewhere around $22. So by the time we get to 15, it's not enough now. It won't be enough then. So how I view it is, the government playing an active role in anyone willing to and wanting employment to have access to it, whether it be through our public work sector, because, of course, I'm not for privatization. When you have the Green New Deal, that's going to create employment, when we're talking about eliminating, the fossil fuel industry, pushing in, clean energy resources. The government plays a role in guaranteeing that jobs are available. Look at construction workers. They have guaranteed work year in and year out, particularly in communities like St. Louis and Chicago, because of our winter times and so on and so forth, with our roads, eroding and so on and so forth, they're always going to have employment. They're always going to have work and union protected employment. So that's how I view a federal jobs guarantee. Of course, the specifics are spelled out on our website, but the government working directly with local states, our federal government working directly with local states and local governments to ensure that anyone willing to and wanting to work has some level of employment, making a livable wage.
Now, and I also see that on your website is education, trade school for all, equitable public school funding and support for teachers. You are a public school teacher. So what does I guess what are the policies that you want to focus on with regard to education? Definitely.
I mean, teaching is everything for me. I think teachers are underfunded, underserved, we're overlooked, so a salute to teachers everywhere, and I thank you all, each and every one of you for your service. But as a public school teacher, first and foremost, I recognize the attack on public schools, the push for privatization. The current incumbent in Illinois 7th, he's done work with Rahm Emanuel and Arne Duncan in the past in regards to school closures, in regards to the push for charter schools. So I think we have to take an extremely strong stance against privatization. So I'm 100% against privatization of our educational systems. 1. 2, I think we need to look at our funding models. Funding schools through via property taxes is inequitable. Because again, when you're in communities that are underserved, have lower property tax, lower property value, what are your public schools going to look like? They're not equal. And oftentimes they're still separate, so after Brown versus Board, of course, we had, got rid of separate but equal. We integrated, but yet and still, because of the economic divide that continues to exist, we currently have separate and not equal, so we have to look at our funding models, whether it's the Every Child Succeeds Act, the Title I funding equation that exists from federal dollars coming down. Oftentimes the schools that don't need the funds are still getting the funds. So we have to address our federal funding model in regards to the schools we're helping. We have to address the property tax issue, funding our public schools via property tax. I know many states have gone to a Robin Hood model to where they, collect funds and collect money throughout their society, throughout their communities, and then they allocate in an equitable manner and give more money to the schools that are most in need. So we have to address funding models, have to be 100% against privatization at the high school level. We have to push for unionization. Of course, I'm against charter schools, but I'm glad that our charter teachers across this country are starting to unionize as well, because unions are extremely important. Shout out to CTU, Chicago Teachers Union. We have to ensure that, again, every school has a nurse. Every school has a social worker. Every school has the necessary, accommodations and supports available for all students. That's extremely important. And then when we're looking at college, right now, I think you probably have encountered this. And again, it ties back into why some people enter into the military. I have so many students that want to go to college but can't afford it, or go to college, go to a trade school, and then they're left with an inordinate amount of debt. And they don't have the ability to pursue their dream, to pursue their aspirations, because Sally Mae wants her damn money, and she's calling. And she's calling daily. She's calling weekly. And you're paying $400, $500 a month in student loans. It hinders you. It really does from pursuing your dreams and building up your experiences. So we have to make college, trade free for all, not just some. For all. I believe that needs to be a human right. We have to retroactively forgive, just like we bailed out the banks back in 2008. We have to forgive all student loan debt, because I think that'll be a positive infusion to our economy, alleviating that debt, allowing individuals to get into their workforce without that burden on their back and spend money. So that's huge as well. And I also think, again, looking at our collegiate level, we have to expand the idea of what it means to be successful. Because if you look at European models, they completely, I'm not going to say everyone, but, trades are embraced. Trades are embraced at a higher level, I feel, than the United States of America. So, I mean, it's interconnected, from funding to, eliminating stigmas to, eliminating debt and allowing anyone and everyone to pursue a post-secondary education. So across the board, we just have to systemically change our educational models.
I've always thought that another thing would be to educate on education, because I grew up in a house that all the men were in the military at one point in time, but
Mm-hmm.
we're all college graduates too. So
Mm.
it was impressed on me like, oh, you should go to college. And then come, 17, 18 years old, and I'm trying to think, what do I want to do what do I want to do later? Like, I had absolutely no idea. But
Right.
you get that pressure
Mm-hmm.
because like, well, you're 18, you should go to college now. You should continue to do these things. And I, went off to the military. But I'm a reservist, so I, came back home 6 months later, and I didn't go to college until I was 26, I think. 27 is when I finally started. But at one point in time, I was working with a bunch of IBEW electricians, union
Right.
electricians, and just talking to them about their whole setup. And I was talking to a younger guy who was, at the time I was like 20. I can't remember how old I was, but I was in my late 20s and he was early 20s. He's like, yeah, I make they pay me to go to school.
Oh yeah.
And I come, to these job sites and I make, he's like, I don't make much. He's like, I'm making, like $15 an hour. I'm like, that's awesome. I wish I had been making, $15 an hour and while going to school to
Right.
learn a
Correct.
trade. Like, he's an electrician. And the great thing about that is that's a trade you can take with you. Like, if you decide, like,
Definitely.
I don't want to work, here anymore. I want to go,
Right.
start my own business, or I want to do side work or something. And, like, that's not to say that that's not without its own trials and tribulations. Like, they always have
Mhm.
the electricians would have to go to the union hall to try to get, work, basically. And if there's no work, then you go home. But the guys I was working with, they were on a job for 2 years, getting federal money. It was working at a federal site. So, and that was something that was never impressed on me.
Right.
Never anything that's like, you could become a plumber. Like, plumbers
Right.
exist.
Exactly.
Plumbers
Exactly.
exist, electricians exist, but nobody's ever like, yeah, it's a union job and you can make, 20 plus an hour and you will always be needed. Somebody
Exactly.
will always need your skills, and then you can use your skills at home. Like, I can do like, very base electrical and plumbing in my own house, things I can learn on YouTube. But yeah, like nobody came to me and said, hey, you
Right.
know what else might be out there are these trades that you could do, rather than, because I got friends that went and they got degrees in mass communications, and it's like, what does that even mean? Like,
Yep.
you talking on the phone, you got a degree in that doesn't mean anything,
Right.
and then you try to just leverage that. But like, college these days, it's all about, well, at least when I was searching for a job, it was, we just want you to have a college degree. Like, we want to make sure that you went through 4 years and got some debt to learn how to fix computers, I guess. And like, now, multiple years later, I'm watching people try to get jobs, and what they're doing is, not only do you need the college education, but you need like 5 years experience for us to give you an entry level job.
Yes. Yes. So many students are experiencing that as well, like you stated, where they go to school, they enter into the workforce, they have debt, they need to work, and then people are asking for 3 or 4 years of experience, and they're like, I've never worked before. Or,
Right.
I've only worked part time at a grocery store, and so it's a huge issue.
Yeah, and I've always felt that was kind of a like, when I started, after I got my degree. Actually, I started at my job before I finished college, and when I talked to, I had the base of network engineering, but I had a person who sat there and was just like, all right, I'm going to teach you the way that I want to teach you, that I want you to learn. Rather than having somebody come in with a bunch of, stuff already in the back of their head. They wanted somebody who could, do the job. I guess he wanted somebody that he could train up to do what he wanted me to do. And it was great. I learned all kinds of systems that I had never seen before. That like on the job training, it just seems like nobody wants that anymore. Cause like, I can't be bothered to train you because I've got to do my own job. So I need you to come in here and I need you to be immediately ready to do this job rather than me, taking you and molding you and teaching you how to do it. Which I think is, and I don't know if that's a laziness thing or if it comes down to like, no, we have to constantly be creating capital, and me training you does not create capital, so therefore I cannot sit here and train you.
Right.
And that's, education about education has always just been something, like also education about, how to manage your finances, or, what does an APR mean? Things that nobody teaches you in high school. That's, that we just don't have. So, when is your election?
Yeah, so election takes place March 17th. Early voting to start a few weeks before that, but we're almost there. We got about 90. We're 90 days out. We made the ballot, so that was huge, and we're going to continue to push and fight.
And so you're running as a Democrat. Is the incumbent a Democrat? Are you primarying them?
Correct. So the incumbent has been in office for over 30 years. The incumbent's been in his presidency seat for over 20. We thank him for his service, but we just truly believe, based upon the issues that we're facing locally and nationally, we truly need a fighter in that seat. Someone that's boots to the ground and tapped into the movement. We believe the movement has left the incumbent behind. So yes, so we have an incumbent. We have three other individuals in the race as well. But things have been going extremely well for us. We picked up over 13 endorsements. We have by far the most endorsements in the race. We're really picking up via, publications, social media, networking, coalition building. We're boots to the ground on a daily basis. I was hit by a car in August, so that put us out for a little bit. I had to have surgery. But outside of that hiccup, we've really been building movement, and it's been beautiful.
The one thing that I love about socialists running is that socialists don't stop. There's whether win or lose, they don't. It's not like I lost this and now I can't do anything else, because like literally there's just so many different avenues of approach. Like I will never run for office. It's just never going to be a thing that I could do. And also I know that I am not I don't have the personality, especially don't have the drive. But like, there's just so many other things that I can do. I garden, and I
Right.
grow stuff and then give it away to the community. There's just so many different ways. And you as a teacher and as an organizer already, and running a not-for-profit, and then running here, it's just like it seems like a lot of socialists just like reinvent themselves every 5 to 10 years, especially when they just keep going. Because it's always learning and always trying new things. So. Where can people find you?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you again for having me on. I've truly appreciated our conversation. Our campaign website is www.voteanthonyclark.com is our direct campaign website. And you can find us on all social media applications at Anthony V. Clark 20. That's at Anthony V. Clark 20.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you for what you're doing. And thanks for coming on the show.
No, thanks for having me. Let's keep up this fight. Revolution, not reform. All power to the people. Appreciate it.